Is this the end of the crypto market? I would say, look, it's most likely crypto is volatile, but it's not just volatile to the downside. It also means it's volatile to the upside. Bitcoin is actually the thing. The altcoins are just basically gambles. Could you imagine that? They sold their gold and then bought Bitcoin. I have the money to take advantage right now of these cheap Bitcoin prices. Every day I'm pretty much buying Bitcoin. There is so much wealth to be made without even trading. Why would I even bother trading? The problem in Australia is I'm Matthew Fraser and this is Crypto Collective. After making millions with Amazon and e-commerce, I realized that if I was starting again today, crypto would be my first choice. I'm here to help you take your first steps and build real wealth. Ready to set yourself up for life? Let's go. Hey guys, welcome to Crypto Collective. My name is Matthew Fraser. And in this episode, is this crash the end for crypto? So guys, I just want to talk to you about the current market and where we are in this cycle. It's kind of pretty bleak out there, to be honest, for some things, but not all things. For example, if you hold altcoins, you're feeling pretty shit, to be honest. And I've said it before, some of my altcoins are down 80%. I actually rotated out of some of my major altcoins where I had sort of multiple five figures, let's say, 50 grand, things like that. I rotated out of those and put them into some higher market cap coins like Solana, for example. And I guess at the time it just seemed like it was the right thing to do. And I don't want to say I could predict the future that everything was going to continue to go down, because a lot of the other altcoins I didn't rotate out of, right? But that being said, I've got small amounts, just like five figures, multiple five figures, for example, under 10 grand. I always sort of think of these things as, hey, look, if altcoins go to zero, would I survive? And because altcoins make up a small portion of my portfolio, the answer is yes, because fundamentally, my belief is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is actually the thing. The altcoins are just basically gambles. All right. And so I've just allocated a small amount of my portfolio to the gambling sector, but heavy into Bitcoin. And that's what I suggest to a lot of people that talk to me, particularly people who are new, right? I say, look, just forget about the altcoins, because it takes a long time to understand the altcoins. Just focus on Bitcoin, because, at the end of the day, and this is kind of true of where we are right now in the market, is if Bitcoin goes down even more, right now it's around the $80,000 mark. If it drops down to say $60,000, there is no reason to sell. I'm not selling Bitcoin at 60,000. You're going to say, well, Matt, what would you do? Well, I was going to say nothing. No, it's not true. I wouldn't just do nothing. I'd be buying more. I'd be like, oh my God, this is even cheaper now. So I'd be buying more Bitcoin at $60,000, because at the end of the day, it's about the long-term, I guess, or the longevity of that asset. Do you believe in Bitcoin or do you not? And it's about having conviction in the asset. Now, if you have conviction in some altcoins, great, hold on to the altcoins then, even if they drop 80%, right? Because you obviously believe that over the long term, they're going to be going higher. So I think that sort of give you some nuances with the differences between Bitcoin and the altcoins. And I guess, market corrections within bull cycles are common. This is not new, right? In fact, I think it was the last bull cycle, if my memory serves me right, there was about 4 or 5 different corrections on the way up, right? So it's going up a bit and then drops 30%, up a bit and then drops 20%, right? And so overall, the market was going up. And if you actually zoom out right now, as in zoom out to even the past 5 years, even the last sort of 2 or 3 years, Bitcoin from the low in roughly 23 is going up, even though we've had this correction now of roughly on Bitcoin went down to about 30%. There is talk that potentially it goes lower, but again, I'm not really worried about that, because I'm holding on to Bitcoin for the long term anyway. Don't get caught out either, because I've seen this from some other people where, there is talk that, let's say this talk is dropping to $60,000 odd. So there's a $20,000 drop. People will sell it at 80 with the expectation it goes to 60, but then, oh, guess what? Here, that thing I saw on social media that said it was going to 60, it didn't actually go to 60. Maybe it only dropped to 75. Okay. And now the problem is you've just sold it at 80. You've held it down to 75, right? Now, the problem in Australia particularly is we have to pay taxes. So now you've got to pay tax potentially on the gain. It really complicates things. It's not just a straight, hey, I sold it for 80, I bought back in at 75, I'm up. It's not as clear cut as that. So just be really, really careful. The other thing that could happen is you sell it for 80 and the talk of it going to 60 just didn't go down at all. Maybe something happens in the market, and there's always something that you least expect. And so you could say, well, what could happen? Maybe Donald Trump announces something. Actually, maybe it's not even America, right? Maybe it's like Russia, right? And maybe or maybe India, another country with perhaps a high GDP, or China would be a great example. China just comes out and says, or it's just been discovered, they've just purchased, I don't know, 500,000 Bitcoin somehow, right? They can't even do that, but they're just sucking up Bitcoin like there's no tomorrow, right? They're taking all off the OTC desk, wherever they can get it. They're going to the Bitcoin miners, they're sucking the whole place dry, and they are getting the Bitcoin, right? Maybe they even sold their gold. Could you imagine that? They sold their gold and then bought Bitcoin. That would tank the gold market. And so if you're someone who's completely into gold, you could see the tank of the gold market, then buy gold cheap if you think it's going to keep going up. But it would tank the gold market, but then also Bitcoin would then start going up. So maybe what I'm saying is maybe something that is completely unforeseen from you and from the people who are talking on social media. And I'm not saying that everyone on social media is bad, just that no one's got a crystal ball is pretty much my point, right? So you don't want to get out at $80,000. The next thing you know, you wake up tomorrow and it's like $120,000, right? That would suck, okay? So I would say, particularly on Bitcoin and things that you were convicted on within the altcoin space, I would just hold those. I wouldn't be getting out. Now, if you've got some other altcoins though that you simply do not believe in, and you think they're never coming back, right? Up to you, sell them, right? But I'm holding on to my Bitcoin, that's for sure. The other thing too, I guess, that's happening in the space is the reason why it's down is because of what's called FUD, right? This fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the market from a macro perspective, like a worldwide perspective. And the things that are happening right now, Donald Trump and tariffs, people are sort of on edge about what's happening with the different tariffs around the world. You've also got things that are happening in the Ukraine, right? So you've got Russia, the Ukraine, you've got America involved. You've now got predominantly France and the UK. The France and UK, from what I read the other day on the news, they've just announced they're going to start sending troops into the Ukraine, right? So this could, no wonder there's some sort of uncertainty in the market. This could be catastrophic because this could actually pull in America, especially if it's pulled in under NATO, right? And I did see an article that said, America should pull out of NATO before it's too late because apparently they're obligated to step in under NATO conditions. I don't know if Trump would actually do that. I think, he would really be putting America in a spot of bother for sure, because you don't want to get into this position where you're now talking nuclear weapons being exchanged between America and Russia. What? Over Ukraine? You're kidding me? That would be ridiculous. So Ukraine, for all it's worth, is sort of not some sort of saint country. So I wouldn't be expending any of our military lives on the Ukraine, put it that way. There must be other solutions. And I think what Donald Trump is trying to do is help in that space to find a resolution without sending troops in, right? So the other things that are happening in the space right now to do with this particular market is people are getting liquidated, right? People are getting liquidated left, right, and center. So it's putting a lot of upwards and downwards pressure on the market. Liquidated meaning that people are using leverage and betting against the market moving either up or down, right? And there are sites where you can go to where you can find this type of information which shows how much leverage is in at a certain point. And so you've got these big money makers or market makers in the world who will come in, who will manipulate the price on different assets, just like Bitcoin, so that the market either tanks down or comes up and then liquidates people who are gambling. Basically, that's what it is, right? They're gambling on a particular outcome. So you can just think of it this way. If you go to the races and you bet on a horse, the bookie doesn't want that horse to win. He doesn't want to have to pay you out for that horse winning, right? Now, if he could fix it so that you didn't win, he'd make all the money, right? And that's basically what happens within these types of spaces. So you got to be really careful. I never use leverage. I don't do any trading whatsoever. I'm the first one to put my hand up and say trading is just a whole nother thing that I'm uneducated in, and it would take me a long time to get educated in it, and I just rather not lose my money. There is so much wealth to be made without even trading. For me anyway, why would I even bother trading, right? If I did go into trading, it would just be because I just want to do something fun and I'd start using, like paper money basically. But the gains to be had in Bitcoin alone over the long term are so great that why would you even take the risk, to be honest? Okay. The other thing to think about is just in recent times, there was the whole meme coin scenario where there was just, I forget the number, but it was something extraordinary. Like, I'm throwing this number out there because it was crazy. It was like 50,000 meme coins like a day, right? It was something phenomenal. We're just being put out into the market, and there was this craze that was happening. This is sort of earlier on this year, and people were just rushing into these things and there was so much hype around them because you jumped on social media, you saw some guy that put in like $10 and he pulls out like 100,000 and you think, oh my God, I want to get some of that. And of course you do, right? It's easy money. But it turns out when you sort of look behind the curtain, it wasn't so easy, right? Either that was a manipulated video to look like the market was doing really well and looked like this guy was making money, but it really wasn't. And so people were rushing into these meme coins thinking, hey, I'm just going to put like $100 in or $1,000 in, wait for the market to go up, and then I'm going to sell out at like $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, right? Easy. Hey guys, just quickly, if you're serious about Bitcoin, you have to think about security and self-custody. For years, I was constantly worried about losing my Bitcoin portfolio. That's when I discovered the Bitcoin way. Their team helped me sleep at night by securing and protecting my Bitcoin for generations to come. I only recommend services that I use myself, and that's why I've partnered with the Bitcoin way. If you want their help, use the link in the show notes to book a free call. Now back to the episode. And of course, what happened was every one of these types of meme coins was just getting rug pulled, which means that the liquidity was coming in. People were putting their money into these meme coins, that it was driving the price up. And then those behind the curtains who'd staged the whole thing were then like dumping their coins, selling, right? And what happens is it takes all the liquidity, which is all the cash, right, all the money out of the system. So by the time you're thinking, oh, I'm going to sell my meme coin now, there's no money there, right? Because in order for you to sell, someone else also has to buy, you see? And you're like, oh, fuck, I didn't think of that, right? I didn't think of that, damn it. So by the time it drops to zero, no one else is buying it because everyone realizes that that was a big rug pull and was basically a big scam. There was 50,000 meme coins a day that were being put out into the marketplace. That is insane. Can you imagine? 50,000 and 49,999 of those are complete scams. That's what happens. Don't get caught into that, because I hear so many stories. I know of people personally who have done that, right? Now, luckily for them, it wasn't their entire life savings. It was just a good lesson for them, right? And they're like, okay, mental note, not doing that again. I'm just going to focus on putting that money into Bitcoin and then keep it simple. So this leads me to the retail punter. Right? You hear about retail. Retail means people like you and me, right? We're not big fish. We're not multi-quadrillionaires. We're not corporations. We're not governments, right? We're retail. And I fit into that category too. And if you just look around, I mean, right now in Australia, we have a federal election that's on. And so what's happening is all these issues are kind of being brought into light, which is about what does the average person in the street actually think about what's happening in the economy? And this leads to how much money they have, right? Which is basically most people are living week to week, right? Because as you know, we're in a rental crisis, we're in a housing crisis, and we're in a cost of living crisis. And what does that mean? It means that the cost of living is so great that people cannot afford to pay for the basics, right? The cost of living, electricity is a big one, rent, food, right? They're sort of the bare essentials, a roof over your head, something on your back, and food. If that's what's happening out in the marketplace right now, how many people actually have money then just to put into this thing called crypto? Right? Or Bitcoin, right? No one, right? If the average punter has got no money, You just see someone the other day. I've put some up even on my social media. Jump into my Instagram account and have a look at some of the videos I've put up recently of guys who they're at some sort of like an SBS forum. They get up, they talk about, hey, I'm working 3 jobs, or the rent's just gone up. If it goes up one more time by like $10 a week, I'm gonna have to move me and my kids out of there. We're probably gonna be homeless because we just cannot afford to pay any more rent, right? There's other stories about people who, they can't get into the housing market altogether, right? So they want to buy a house, they can't afford to save up for a deposit, right? This is very, very common. You hear it all the time. And it's because they're basically going backwards. That's just the reality of it. And if you listen to any of my other videos, I talk about the hurdle rate. Now, from the research that I've done, the hurdle rate in Australia is probably around 14%, right? I could be wrong. Maybe it's 15, maybe it's 13, but let's say 14%. That means that your wage needs to be going up at least 14% per annum in order to stay above inflation and essentially money debasement. It's brutal out there. Okay. And I feel for these guys. So you've got to be, it's like you're swimming against the tide, but it's a very, very bad rip. And so it's really, really tough. And so this leads me to say, well, the reason perhaps why the crypto market, this is sort of adding to it, okay? It's not the reason, it's part of the reasons I think, is that the market is so flat is because these people that I've just spoken about, meaning the average Australian person does not have money to just put into crypto. I'm just gonna put $100 a day into crypto. They don't have $100 a day, not even $100 a week, right? They're going backwards. They're probably living on credit cards, to be honest. And I'm not having a go at them. Many, many years ago, I went through financial tough times and I was basically living on credit. I was going backwards. It wasn't because of inflation and monetary debasement, although that would have been happening too. It was for other reasons. But, I was able to climb out of that and get back on my feet and create a business that, has done now over $60 million. So I'm not crying. In fact, in a way, going through that really, really hard financial period actually led me to make way more money than I probably ever thought I would ever make, to be honest. Having done $60 million in sales, and that's just through one business. I've got another business that's done even more. It certainly put me in a much better position, but I have the money, right? This is what I'm getting at. Someone like me, I have the money to take advantage right now of these cheap Bitcoin prices, right? Every day I'm pretty much buying Bitcoin. Right? Whether it's through company profits, whether it's through, I sell a car that I don't want anymore, whatever it is, right? I'm in that position, right? But I never used to be in that position, okay? It's taken me a long time to get there. What's happening right now is because of this cost of living housing crisis that's happening in Australia and many parts around the world, they just don't have the splish splash of money to put into crypto. So therefore, it's not sort of pushing the prices up like perhaps what we thought it was too. So I think that's also playing a part. Now, of course, you've got the retail investors that I've just spoken about, but you've also got the big money, I'm going to say market makers, because people like Warren Buffett, I would say is pretty big. Let's just call him a big fish, okay? You've got big fish out there who have actually put money to the side. I think I even saw a video the other day about Robert Kiyosaki, that he's stashed money aside. We know Warren Buffett has put something like 300 million US dollars aside. He's parked it. What for? Why would he be doing that? Because he probably knows something that perhaps the market is going to crash more. Maybe something else is going to happen. I don't know. But it just seems a bit odd that he's parked that much cash. Now, he's not stupid. He knows as well, though, if he's parked money in cash, it's actually going backwards. He needs to have that assigned to an asset. So maybe he's just holding his powder dry. He knows something is going to happen, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he just is thinking it may happen, and therefore, if it does, he's going to have money to deploy, right? Which would be great if everyone was in that position for sure. So the other thing to think about too is in social media world, we can create an echo chamber. So once one person starts saying things are bad, someone else says things are bad, and next thing you know, everybody's talking amongst themselves saying things are bad. So when you come in and you think, oh my God, things are bad, but maybe they're not as bad as what you think anyway. So we have to be careful, of course, of that echo chamber. And I would dare say it's important to listen to people who are probably outside of that echo chamber, who can look at things rationally and not be so biased. So guys, as we wrap up this episode of, is this the end of the crypto market? I would say, look, it's most likely not the end. I don't think that Bitcoin is going to zero. I think that's probably people's number one concern particularly when they're new into Bitcoin. It's like, oh my God, I put money into Bitcoin. Is this the end? Like, is it just going to evaporate? And of course, the signs that are out there, particularly from a a policy perspective that's coming out of America and other parts of the world, they're certainly looking very favorable. So what we do know though is we've seen lots of times in history where people have said the market, the Bitcoin's going to zero, get out. And of course, it never went to zero. It might have corrected, it might have gone down, but it never just evaporates into nothing, right? So the worst case scenario for you right now is if you do hold Bitcoin and you're in the red, you just hold. You just don't do anything. And that being said, I always say to people, don't buy Bitcoin with money that you're going to need like next week or next month, because if it does go down, you then don't want to have to sell it at a loss. So it really is, think of it like a savings for the future, right? Creating generational wealth through Bitcoin. So guys, at the end of the day, the real question is this the end of a get rich quick hype or beginning of real utility and adoption? And in my opinion, it's going to be the best thing. So guys, when I say this has happened before where people have cried, this is going to crash, it's going to zero. Here's the exact examples in the past, right? It was the dot-com bubble in 2000 that wiped 80% off the tech stocks, but not necessarily relating exactly to crypto. But there's been plenty of times in history, as I've mentioned before, where crypto was said to have gone to zero, but not just crypto, but even like things like stocks. So if you even just think back to as most recently, and I say most recently, I'm showing my age, 25 years ago, the dot-com bubble, right, in the 2000s, it wiped out 80% of tech stocks. But once things came back around again, you saw things like Amazon, Google, and Apple, right, which are now some of the best performing stocks. Okay, so things did climb back, but things came out of the ashes. 2008, now this is very important because in 2008 was the GFC, right? Global financial crisis, wiped out trillions, but look at where the S&P and NASDAQ are now. And what's interesting about the GFC is that kind of helped spawn Bitcoin. Bitcoin has now had 80% drawdowns before. It also went from 3,000 to 69,000 in just a few years. So these things happen. As I said before, if in doubt, just don't sell, right? Bitcoin is not going to zero. So guys, I want to say this in wrapping up. Crypto is volatile, okay? But it's not just volatile to the downside, it also means it's volatile to the upside, right? So that's why I said before, you have to stay exposed to Bitcoin in case it goes, you wake up and it's $120,000 because of something happening, right? That you can't foresee. So it is volatile, that's for sure. But it is decentralized, emotional, but offers generational upside. And if you just compare this, for example, to the S&P 500 gains, Bitcoin can be tens of thousands of percent over a decade, even with the crashes. Okay, so even if I just, 10,000, I get it, it's a big number, but even just over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen 50 to 60% compounding rate per annum with just Bitcoin, right? And that's despite the crashes that we've seen in Bitcoin, the crashes, the corrections, okay? So over the long term, you're safe. I believe, just like Michael Saylor says, that Bitcoin is the future. We'll see 30 to 50% gains over the next 20 years. Okay, guys, so just in wrapping up, the moral of the story is buy more Bitcoin. The people that are screaming scam right now will be asking you how to buy it in the next bull run, right? In years to come, they'll look back and they'll say, wow, you bought it at $80,000. How did you have the foresight to buy it at so cheap when it was $80,000? Yeah. Now you don't get wealthy reacting. You get wealthy positioning, right? Every dip is a discount. If you're buying what the masses are avoiding, you're ahead. This isn't the end. It's the beginning for those with vision. Thanks for tuning in to Crypto Collective. If you've enjoyed this episode, the best way to show your support is to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode. You can also find more of me at I'm Matthew Fraser on all social media platforms.